Look at that. We're live in our next spot, which is YouTube. So if you're catching the podcast right now, we're both live on Facebook and YouTube. So that's exciting, like always. And like I said before, if you're just now tuning in, um, this episode is going to be a solo one. John had some scheduling conflicts as well as I did, so we're not going to be able to do both of us this week, but it's okay because we will catch back up on it next week, so it'll be great. So, we've got a really cool, exciting topic today, and it's going to be over Bard. So we covered Bard a little bit. Um, what was it? A few episodes back, and it was a little weak, right? But as we covered a few weeks back, Google had their big I/O event, and a part of that was bigger upgrades to Bard, right? And so it's supposed to do, more content. It's supposed to be able to do more. It's supposed to be able to respond better, all that good stuff, right? All these things to try to catch up to ChatGPT as well as Bing. So I wanted to kind of cover a little bit more of the information and some of the newer updates that's changed Bard, and I'll also try to do a little bit of visuals as well, so that way you guys can see kind of some of these changes. We'll see if we can get some good examples going. I actually did get I got an example a little bit earlier today when I was first kind of starting, so that's really interesting. So it'll be really cool. So let me see here. I'm gonna make sure. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the recording here. Go ahead and get that going. And so like I was saying, this week's episode we're going to be talking about Bard and all the cool changes that has happened. Well, one of the big things is Google already said during their keynote for Google I/O is they're making really big changes. It Google I/O was very much a big push for, we talked about this before, but it was a very big push for Google to kind of jump into the AI space. They've always been there, but this is kind of, in some ways, this is their way of playing catch up. And I guess in some ways we can also say this is Google's first attempt to kind of say, like, hey, we've been here, we've been doing this, this is kind of what we've been working on. Now we're really putting, the stuff that we've been working on for years, we're now actually pushing that out to the public. Because I will say Google has always kind of pushed out really cool ideas during their Google I/O events. Like they talk about, like, at one point they were talking about they were going to use AI to clean up photos, right? We already see some of that, and we talked about that a few weeks back about the magic eraser, and some of the features in that. I know few years back, I think this was way back in like 2017, Google had talked about a feature where you could take a picture of like a chain link fence, or take a picture of, like, say your child plays baseball, right? And you take a picture, but you're behind the chain link fence that's, around the batter. Their presentation said that, hey, we can remove that chain link fence from the image and then kind of fill everything in. We never actually saw that feature come to fruition, right? But it was a cool concept that they kind of talked about. And this IO, though, felt like there was a lot more tangible AI things. And so the biggest thing that we're going to be talking about is Bard and the big upgrades that they went ahead and pushed through and started to do it. A lot of this is just a big push for Google to catch up to ChatGPT. I'm kind of excited to kind of check it out. I did a really interesting example early on, before the episode started. So we'll kind of check some of that out and kind of do a little bit of a compare and contrast between ChatGPT and Bard, um, just so that way you can see. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and jump into it. So give me 1 second. All right, so we're gonna do. Um, Give me, let's see, we're going to go ahead and do the intro, or I'm going to do the intro. Um, if you're listening on the audio version, we'll probably go ahead and cut some of that out and just jump directly into the podcast. But here we go. So, three, two, one. What's up, guys? I'm Dennison, and this is the catch up. Okay, cool. So, I'm going to go ahead and jump back into it. So let's see. Three, two, one. All right, guys. Well, as you may know, um, there are three main ways that you can interact with the show. Number one is you can check us out on Facebook, as well as on anywhere where you can hear our podcasts. So that is Google, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all sorts of other streaming platforms. The other great way that you can check us out is we're also on YouTube. And then, of course, if you are tuning in live, right, you can find us on YouTube as well as on Facebook. Number two, another great way for you to interact with the show is when you are catching those live shows, you can go ahead and interact in the comments of that said show, or even if you're catching, say, the playback on YouTube or even on Facebook, you can go ahead and leave comments on that as well. It's a great way for us to be able to interact with you guys. That was kind of one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to push our podcast to do more live stream content, is so that way we can have that more one-on-one reaction between each other. So that so please jump into the, if you're in the live stream, go ahead and jump into those comments. And of course, if you are on the YouTube page, you can jump into the comments there. You can also, of course, jump into the comments in the playback for these episodes as well. Another great way that you can support the show is our merch, right? We sell merch because the podcast does cost some money. It's a great way to support the show as well as get some really cool swag. So we've got t-shirts, hoodies. Let's see, phone cases, mugs, a lot of really, really cool stuff on there. So go ahead and check that out in the link below. Though that is a great way to support the show and show off really the show to everyone else. It's also a great way to share the content with everyone else as well. So um, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this topic here. So like I said early in the episode, at the very beginning, we're going to be talking about Bard, and the biggest thing about Bard is the changes that Google has made. Um, some of those changes are image, right? So it's going to be able to give you images whenever whenever you're asking certain questions or something like that. It can generate an image, or I shouldn't say generate, it will source an image. It actually talks about that in some of the summary notes of what has been changed in Bard, right? So this is a little bit different than what you get in ChatGPT, where you don't get any images. Or it's not able to source any images. This kind of goes a little bit more hand in hand. Why Bard is a little bit different, because it has that image search functionality now, as well as it also has the functionality of being able to reach out to the internet, where ChatGPT doesn't exactly have those capabilities. Now, being AI, which is technically based on ChatGPT, does have those capabilities. I don't think it has image sourcing yet, but I th- but I know that it can search the internet for certain things. So this is a kind of a really a big push for Google, like I've said before, for them to be able to compete on like a much higher level with Google or sorry, with Microsoft as well as OpenAI. So I'm really, really excited to kind of try out some of those features. They've done a little. Apparently, the one of the other changes that they've made is summarization to make the summaries of whatever the information that you put out into Bard. It's supposed to be able to summarize that a little bit better. And then there's a couple of other miscellaneous things, but those are some of the big ones, I would say. Um, there, there's another one that I'll try to demonstrate. We'll see how it goes. It's one of them is say you were to have it search a whole bunch of stuff and give you some really good information, right? You could tell it to create a document, um, and then it would actually be able to I would be able to grab all that information and put it into like a Google Doc, which is really, really interesting. And it is something that we talked about a few episodes back. So if you haven't seen that one or listened to that one, please go check it out. It's a really, really good, informative one. We really went into depth with not just Bard, but of course, a lot of things that happened at Google I/O. So let me go ahead and see if I can share my screen really quickly. So let's see if we can get that going. One interesting thing, or probably one of the more fun things that I enjoyed from what I've looked at so far with Bard is, and we'll go ahead and boom, now you should be able to see it a little bit better here. So this is actually kind of one of the little examples that I ended up working with. Um, but if you have used Bard before, you may have noticed that Bard actually had it was just a light theme, right? Default. It's all light, which is kind of annoying. I myself am a big fan of dark mode. So for them to make this change, um, kind of is really, really cool for me. I think it's really cool and really, really helpful. So that is one of the cooler changes that they've kind of pushed out. Now, of course, that's kind of small, right? So the other ones that I was going to talk to you about, and we'll even see what we can do, what it can actually do, if it can generate it for us, if it can create it for us, is that image generation. So one of the example that I was trying to pull up and actually have it work on was actually to create a description, funny enough, for the podcast, for today's podcast. Funny thing is, I put this prompt in both Bard and ChatGPT, and the one that actually gave me an answer, or a response, was actually not Bard, as you can see here, but was ChatGPT, which actually gave me a really, really good info, actually gave me a really good couple of responses. So as you can tell, Google is still kind of working. They're still kind of doing their stuff. Um, you know, Google has a lot to prove, and I will say this is probably not the best. I actually regenerated these prompts a little bit, like three different times, and I got the exact same answer. So I don't know exactly what happened there. So gosh darn, this export response is actually a really new feature here. So this is that Google Docs or Gmail draft, which is really cool. So there you're seeing that integration that Google is really trying to push, especially for the G Suite. Now, one other thing to note is that they also implemented some of these newer changes to Bard, as well as um, the Google Workspace suite in general, right? They're doing more to integrate Bard into other workspace things. You can actually, if you have a Google Workspace account or just a regular Google account, you can actually request to be in the wait list so that way you can actually get access to this stuff early on. But that's actually how I also got uh, access to Bard. But um, that is a really kind of cool feature, and I can see it being really, really, really helpful as like time goes on. But anyway, let's see if we can get it to bring up, say, we'll just say Uh, can you find a picture? I'm just going to do a pic. We'll see what happens. Of a cat. Let's see. Because now, since it's, oh, look at that. See, that's kind of cool. So it was able to, one, understand that I actually said what pic actually means, and it actually gave me a cat picture. That's good job, Bard. I mean, that was kind of a low bar, but it worked out. Um, and then, of course, it has this little Google it deal. So this is kind of interesting, right? I'm sure if I were to, let's see what actually happens if we were to put this same prompt into Bard, or sorry, not Bard, but ChatGPT. I'm actually going to do it on the back end, and then I can share it on the other side. Let's see what happens. Let's see. Yep. So it actually can't do that. So that's great. Um, so Bard did do something that ChatGPT can't. Now, of course, there if you get a little bit more nuance, it's not going to do great. What you see here too is another new feature that they actually added, which was sourcing. Right? I think one of the big things that Google really pushed and talked about during their keynote was the push for better sourcing, right? As well as the push to make sure that there's less possibility of users getting un or I should say like information from their AI that is not fully accurate, that doesn't have any sources backed to it, and doesn't really do a great job of like presenting the information, right? So they wanted to try to make sure that they could be as factual as well as ethical, gosh darn, ethical as possible. So that is, I think this is kind of a part of that, right? Let's see what happens if I click it. Oh, wow, look at that. It even took me to the link. So that's really nice. I think that's a great way for them to really push the use of this AI, right? Now, of course, I can't think of most of the time if I'm searching for, if I'm going to use, right, an AI to be a substitute for me searching something, right? So, because the biggest thing about it, right, if you're using AI in a or in the place of or gosh darn, if you are trying to substitute using, say, one of these conversational chat AIs instead of actually Google searching something, is that you're able to speak to it, or I guess really write to it, right, in a more natural manner rather than a more search optimized way, right? Because normally we don't search the same way that we would actually ask someone a question, right? Like I'm not going to say picture cat Nat Geo or something like that, right? But I could search that and that'll probably get me exactly what I need. Where if I wanted to actually ask someone, hey, can you find me a picture of a cat from Nat Geo? Uh, that's you can ask someone that, but if you were to ask Google that, it'll probably do decent, but it's not going to be perfect, right? So that is kind of the beauty of these. And so of course you need to have prompts or anything like that that are a little bit more specific, right? Or I should really say a little bit more well documented, a little bit easier, right? It can do more than what you would normally search in a regular like Google search or even Bing search at this point, right? Which, by the way, if you've used Bing recently with their chatbot, it works really well. So I do always recommend someone to try it out and check it out. It's pretty cool. I'll say it feels like it's gotten a little rockier than it once was. So that's always interesting to see. Of course, Microsoft is consistently tweaking it, changing it, because they have really pushed themselves to show that they are kind of all in on this because they have, as it's probably been explained by tons of people at this point, right? They have nothing to lose by them pushing, well, I guess nothing to lose but money, but for them to push their Bing AI chatbot, where Google has everything to lose, right? And so I will say that's probably one reason why we've seen Google be a little bit more reluctant to release certain features, as well as more curated to release certain things, because they kind of are the dominating force right now when it comes to search engines, when it comes to searching for answers or anything like that, right? Everybody already knows the phrase that's already in Bard right here, Google it, right? Um, and so they have a lot on the line for them to, if they get it wrong. And so I think that's kind of one reason why they're trying to be a little bit more cautious as they continue to roll out features and stuff like that. Anyway, moving on. Um, the other interesting thing that they really pushed out was better. Well, we're already seeing the better sourcing. I don't know if that's better, but we'll see. And by the way, if you guys are listening in, or if you guys are on the podcast or just watching us on the live stream, please go ahead, and if you have like comments or anything that you want to talk about, um, let me jump in these comments and go ahead and ask some questions. If you want to see a question that you want to be asked to Bard, right, as we're kind of testing it, stress testing it, and seeing what we can get and what we can maybe break. Who knows? I've already done that apparently. um, Go ahead and let me know. But let's jump back into this. So the other thing that I really wanted to talk about, and this is just more of an overarching kind of deal with Bard in general, is that honestly, I haven't been super duper impressed, right? I think from the amount that I've used it, and I'll say it's waned more and more as I use it, right? Because I find that there are more moments where I get this, right? Maybe not exactly this same context, but I get something in the form of not well, not really a lot of, not the information that I get is not that great, or it's not able to actually produce any answer at all, right? Now, of course, I'm sure Google has created it to where if it can't understand, it's not going to just plop something out. Where I feel like sometimes in ChatGPT, it just plops something out. Even if it doesn't fully understand what you're asking it or what you want it to do, it'll just plop something out, right? So that way it can be um, confidently wrong, as I think many news outlets have kind of talked about, as well as what we've talked about. Um, ChatGPT is not afraid of giving you wrong information. It will be confident in everything that it does, which can be a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time, right? Um, but yeah, I haven't really been using it as much as I would say ChatGPT, because I find that ChatGPT, even if it's the older model, right? John actually has access to the ChatGPT, or I should say GPT-4 version of ChatGPT, um, which gives out a lot more, a little bit more detailed and better answers than what ChatGPT 3.5, I guess, is technically the whole name of it, right, does. But I will say it's more consistent. It's a lot more consistent than what Bard is. Um, which is kind of a shame. I do like that they give you this option to where you can actually use your microphone, right, and to speak a question instead of having to type it. That's something, again, that um, ChatGPT doesn't have. And I will say also, it's one thing that I feel like Google does a really good job of is for transcribing, right? I may not be a Pixel owner, but I have heard from other Pixel owners the transcribing on their phones, which you can do in the regular recorder application that comes with it, is really, really good, right? And it's able to do it live. It's able to do it very fast. So I can really understand why they would add something like this, right? To give it the ability to do this, to make it a little bit easier for it to, pardon me, for it to be able to get responses. Another thing that I think is kind of lacking from Bard right now, um, and it's something that I have come to really rely on or know or use more, is an app. Right? It sounds silly, right? At this point, right? We all know that we can go to our phones, browsers, and then we can jump directly to these chatbots and use them in whatever way. But if I'm not mistaken, ChatGPT, or I should say OpenAI, which is the company of ChatGPT, or the company who created ChatGPT, as well as the GPT 3, 3.5, and 4 language models, they are in the process, or have, I can't remember exactly, released an app on iPhone, which is, or I should really say on iOS, right, to be more specific, which is really big, right? Of course, they didn't release it on Android, which does make me a little sad, but I can get over that. But I think that's a big jump, right? And I think it gets the AI model into, or the chatbot really into the hands of your average consumer, and it becomes a lot easier. They're able to jump into it a lot faster. They're able to do more in it. And I think that's a really big step, right? Um, the reason why I actually say that it's a really big step is because I find myself still using Bing even more than I would ChatGPT, because Bing has an app. Now, technically, it's not just for the chatbot, right? It's technically for their whole search engine, but Bing has an app. So, and within that app, I can actually access Bing AI, and that has been really, really helpful, incredibly helpful, because I feel like sometimes I can load that up faster than I would, say, a saved web page on my phone's browser. So I think that really makes a big step, and I think Google has the opportunity to do that, and I'm sure it's something that they're going to work on. Um, Bard is still experimental, right? It's still in its infancy stages, so I can easily see later on it getting to that point. But for right now, pardon me. But for right now, it is right now it's more restricted, right? It's restricted in its responses. It's more restricted in how you can access it. I believe you still have to be on a wait list to access Bard currently, which I believe they're opening up a lot faster now to people, but you still have to kind of be a part of a wait list before you can actually use it. So that is something that they're pushing out to try to get to more people, but it's still in its very infancy stages. Um, the last thing that I really wanted to talk about in here is, of course, they've opened it up to where it's able to understand a lot more languages, which is a big deal. Big deal for accessibility, as well as it's able to summarize things a little bit better. But I also want to check out this Google Docs photo, this exporting to Google Docs. So I'm going to actually change the way that I'm sharing real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and get back here. And I'm going to share my whole screen this time instead of just my one window, which is what I did there. Let's see. There we go. So, well, hello. You can see the super long thing here. But I want to go ahead and see what it happens when it's doing this export to, doc, right? We're just going to do the cat one. Okay, so it just said new document available. Let's go ahead and click on it. Let's see. Okay, so this is all the stuff that I was talking about earlier, where and we'll actually, I think me and John are going to try to get into this a little bit, either next episode or a few episodes later. But I actually gained access to the labs version, right, of workspaces, which gives me access to a lot of the newer AI features that they're really trying to push into. So let's see. Interesting. Well, I guess we can kind of do a little bit of both because it is using Bard, right? Or the overarching AI in the background, which would be Palm 2. But it's using that to do a lot of things. It's interesting that it didn't actually include the cat picture, but maybe it couldn't do that. Let's see what happens if we just do. Um, let's see. We'll just do it this way. You write something, write something. Help me write, let's see, cool facts about cats. Let's see what we got. Let's see what it's able to just generate, right? And then I'm going to actually do a quick little test, right? I'm actually going to go ahead and pull whatever this guy right here, right? Help me write cool facts about cats. And then I'm actually going to plop that back into Bard because I also want to see the response. So we can do compare and contrast, and we can also see if it really is using the exact same model or if they're using different fragmented versions of that, if that makes any sense, right? So let's see here, some cool facts about cats. And then we'll also go back over here. Okay, look at that. Front and center. Both of those are the exact same. This is slightly different. Of course, it's going to shuffle things around, but that's pretty cool. It's very nice and bulleted, right? Um, and I'm sure you can. Oh, yeah, see, here we go. Interesting, though. Do I need to go back into. Oh, I see. Here we go. So it actually allows me to recreate, refined. Oh, so you can refine it a little bit more. So if I want to shorten it, let's see what happens there. So this is again, if you guys are just tuning in, um, okay, so that's kind of cool. It did make it a little bit shorter, not a huge amount. What if I rephrase? I'm showing kind of some of the cooler features, and of course, I think eventually we'll go a little bit more in depth with. So there's a rephrasing of what it's given me, which I didn't really give it too many great parameters, right? Um, but some of the newer features that is within the Bard AI, right? This is great. See, this is that sourcing that we talked about, right? I think the first time that I actually tried Bard and the few times that I had tried it afterwards is that I found that Bard didn't provide as many sources as I found with Bing. Bing AI did provide a source almost every single thing that it would state. So it is nice that they're actually doing this. This is great. Um, okay, so this just tells you, I guess, how their sources are used, and then each of these are, different places that it goes to do the facts. Now, one thing that I will say that I kind of wish it did is, oh, never mind. Look at that. It did exactly what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, I wish that it would tell me where it got these sources, like which fact came from which source, right? So that way I can go back and make sure, like, oh, this is that, this is this, blah blah blah. So it's really neat that it does that. Now, of course, it seems like it's kind of grabbed the rest of this from miscellaneous sources, but it is really nice that it's done this. I think, pardon me, I think this is a really, really neat sourcing process. And I can see that it has gotten, or it's done a lot better than it did before. So I'm already starting to see. Oh, that's interesting. So you can also search interesting deals directly here. That's also a smart way to do it, to integrate it in there. Now, of course, the other thing that is coming out of this is Bard, right? Is Google's chatbot, right? But in the form that it is currently, it is closer to ChatGPT than it is to Bing, where Bing AI is more integrated with the search functionality, right, of the Bing browser, or not browser, but the Bing search engine. Bard is using, of course, Google's search engine, but its form factor is a little bit different. Google is eventually going to allow. Interesting. I wanted to see if anything had changed, but no, it hasn't. But eventually, Google is going to allow a chatbot style search, um, similar to how Bing has it currently. So that'll be really interesting, right? So if we go here, this is just something that I searched at one point. You have that chat functionality, right? And you can just jump directly into it. Eventually, Google is going to is going to start that process and integrate that. I actually signed up for the wait list on that, so I can't wait. It'll be great. Um, but anyway, these are just kind of some really interesting updates that they've done, right? This exporting feature is probably one of the cooler ones. So I can easily see if you're getting really deep into like a conversation with Bard and then you get some really good information that you needed, you can now move that directly into some of Google's other products, right? Which now also have a lot of AI assistance and kind of really increase your workflow. I think that's the biggest thing that Google really was trying to push, especially with this workspace portion, is that it can help increase your productivity um, for everything that you're doing. So I think that's a really great way to do it. Of course, Microsoft is doing something similar with their Copilot, but so we're kind of gonna, as time goes on, really within the next month, few months, and we've already seen this. You know how quickly these AI competitors, or just these AI battles, right? In some ways, have really sped things along, but we're going to see in the next few months probably more of that integration showing up, and not just in Microsoft's Office suite, but also in Google's Workspace suite, which is kind of the counterpart to the Microsoft Office suite, or the M365 suite, right? So it's really exciting. It's really exciting to see what's got going, or what we have going on. If you guys do, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But if you guys do happen to have any comments or any thoughts on any of this, please go ahead and leave a comment. And um, you can, well, if you're still here, right, you can jump into the podcast and go ahead and leave a comment there. But you can also leave it in the post that you see on Facebook, or you can leave it on the video, under the video on YouTube, so that way we can read it, and even maybe even jump into a little bit of that discussion in our next episode. So, thank you guys so much for being here with me. You know, letting me talk to you guys a little bit more about Bard, as well as more, gosh darn, as well as some of the cool, exciting features that have come to Bard, and really kind of seeing this AI battle continue to heat up and continue to grow. I'm really, really excited to kind of see where things go and how things continue to move. So I think, it's going to be a great discussion either way. Well, anyway, you guys have a wonderful weekend. Um, have a great 3-day weekend, hopefully. And we will catch up with you guys next week.